Hello and welcome back to Simple Times Studios, where we recount epic tales of solo roleplay for your entertainment. Once again, we are returning to Psion Novastar in Ecumenopolis of Mystery, Part 4. Returning back to the research base after searching the sprawling theme park for the missing Federation programmer Chen, Psion spent the next few days analyzing the plant samples he collected and reflecting on his previous adventure before preparing for his next expedition into the abandoned city. He ended up spending as much time back on his ship, the Insatiable Curiosity, as he did in the research base. While the facilities were adequate if undersupplied, the atmosphere in the base was electric. There was still tension between base leader Raven Goldmeadow and data specialist Stardust. Raven had apparently sent a report to the sponsoring research university and requested that they send a replacement for Stardust in addition to the personnel and equipment listed in her previous request. Apparently, she also typed this request up, saved it to a memory device, and asked the humans to transmit it on her behalf to prevent any chance of Stardust tampering with it. The human commander, Raymond Dunner, was similarly angry and more than happy to help with this. And it looked like Stardust wasn't particularly popular with the rest of the research base. Most of the other researchers and technicians Psion talked to after the news spread were celebrating her forced transfer off-world. Psion merely shook his head as he recounted the events while collecting equipment for his next expedition. It was done, and it didn't need any input from him. But again, the smart field researcher had other things to focus on, such as finally making his way towards the city park. The project to restore a little more of the Ecumenopolis' train network had made a little more progress while Psion finished his research and started consulting maps of the city. The results of his botanical analysis were fascinating. It looked like the greenery the builders decorated that apartment with was bioengineered to double as both toxin filters and as cooking spices. How that worked without poisoning anyone that cooked with the plants was something that definitely needed to be followed up on later. Would the park he was supposed to go to be similar? There was only one way to find out, he decided as he reviewed the map. Walking the way he originally planned would have taken 2 to 3 days, but if he was reading the map correctly, the humans had just connected the base to a station that was right by the city park. Once he finished analyzing and cataloging the plant samples from the apartment building, Psion Novastar finally boarded the vacuum train for the park. The ride there was quiet. Outside of a squad of human trailblazers that mostly kept to themselves for the trip, Psion rode alone. About half an hour later, they arrived and disembarked from the train. Psion followed the human explorers back up to the street level, then turned and headed his own way when the others disappeared deeper into the city. According to the digital map on his pocket computer, the Ursan explorer just needed to head down his current street and turn at the intersection roughly 10 miles just down the street. Slowly, purposefully, he walked towards the end of the street past abandoned ground cars and under the bright lights of street lamps that had yet to burn out despite years of use on a level that rarely sees sunlight beneath the towering skyscrapers and networks of covered walkways. He avoided running, no sense wasting stamina when there was so much ground to cover. Okay. Does Psion encounter anything unusual as he makes his way to the park region? I give it a 50-50, and 59 says no. There isn't anything particularly interesting, but then there isn't anything dangerous either. Reaching the intersection without incident, Psion turned and found himself facing what could only be the border of the park. Down this second street, the city just abruptly ended and gave way to signs of an overgrown wilderness. Only the metal fence covered with vines gave any sign that the wilderness wasn't entirely natural. His destination finally in sight, the Commonwealth explorer walked his way up to the edge of the park and started to search for an entrance. It didn't take long. The fence soon opened with an ornate, gravity-defying metal archway marking the eastern entrance. Novastar walked under the archway and into the park itself. Okay, time to switch to the Wilderness Hexcrawl rules from the Book of Lost Tables and make a few rulings. We will be exploring hexes 1 mile wide, and the overall environment is temperate, so I may re-roll if the result doesn't make sense, but not too often. This particular park is the size of a major city on 21st century Earth, after all. It's a lot of ground to cover and squeeze various biomes in. I'm going to roll a 25 for starting terrain, forest. And 550 says no other signs of civilization so far. Ambling through the massive eastern gate, Psion soon found himself in a massive old-growth forest. Were it not for the occasional patches of pavement beneath his green boots and the park entrance behind him, he would have thought he was walking along a wide forest trail. Nothing stuck out so far. No sign of abandoned park facilities or anything else unusual. Most of the plants this far in were already cataloged by other explorers. And what little animal life the stout Ursan explorer could see was similarly documented. Seeing all there was to see, he followed the trail westward. Okay, heading west to the next hex. I roll a 23, some more forest. 137 on the civilization table, so nothing there yet either. And I don't find any unique miscellaneous wilderness encounters either. The next mile was much like the first. A dense growth of old trees surrounded him as ruined paths weaved through the underbrush before disappearing in various directions. Psion turned his head and looked every way, trying to settle on a direction or find some signage that could direct him to somewhere specific in the park. Surely there had to be physical signs or some navigation program similar to what he saw in the amusement park. Okay. Is there some sort of sign offering some sort of direction? I say 50-50, and 21 says yes. Is it physical? Again, 50-50, and 63 says no. Curious. Psion looked, but no matter where, he couldn't see anything that looked like a physical sign. However, after brushing some vines away from a suspiciously straight object, he found a metallic pillar that seemed strangely out of place. Could it be a wireless transmitter of some kind? He pulled out his pocket computer and started scanning for a signal. Okay, Psion attempts a computer skill check to detect the signal that the dice oracle says is there. 1d20 plus 7, and I get an 11. Well, if it's there, he doesn't detect it. His pocket computer projected its findings on his green smart goggles. Didn't look like there was anything there he could access. Not here, at any rate. Shrugging, he put the device back in his jumpsuit pockets and resumed walking westward deeper into the parkland. Heading west again. I roll a 75, so the forest thins out to an open grassland. I get 670 on the civilization table, so no ruins either. We're going to roll on the random encounter table because not a lot is happening, and we get a 32%. Psion doesn't encounter anything hostile or otherwise. I guess the dice oracles disagree with me. 2 miles westward from the entrance, the forest started to thin out, and the sun began to peek through the canopy. Soon Psion walked out through the tree line and into a grassy plain. Waist-high grasses grew wild in the bright sun. Paths marked as much by worn dirt as they were by the old pavements threaded through the tall grass. The Ursan explorer looked at the fields surrounding him carefully and sniffed the air. The grass was still, but it was still important to pay attention. Okay. Psion makes a perception check to notice anything dangerous or of interest. A 1d20 plus 4, and he gets a 12 for his trouble. Well, nothing is going to catch him unaware unless it makes an active effort. There wasn't anything that caught his attention in the grassy fields. His nose picked up a number of unfamiliar aromas, but nothing that immediately called to him as dangerous or unusual. Turning his head, he went back to walking westward. Okay, we head west again into the next hex. We get an 81, so more grasslands. We get a 14 on the civilization table for an individual dwelling. Okay, I'm going to ask the Dice Oracle if it's inhabited or not. If it is, it's a temporary camp of another exploration team. If it isn't, it's an empty maintenance building and has a connection to the maintenance tunnels beneath the park. I give it a 50-50, and 97 says no. We found a dungeon entrance. Psion kept walking for another mile as the grassland continued to extend seemingly in every direction. He can imagine a time back when the sprawling city was still inhabited. Children running through these fields and playing various games, while landscaping staff regularly mowed the grass to keep it from growing as wild as it was now. It was sombering, thinking of how quickly civilization can be undone by the natural forces of the universe. His musings were soon interrupted by the appearance of a small, squat, square hut made out of concrete. Part of the building was covered by overgrown bushes and grasses, but as he came closer, more of it came into view. Brushing aside some ivy with a gloved hand, Psion uncovered the door and stepped inside. Inside the overgrown concrete hut was equipment storage, likely one of many such buildings for the park's groundskeepers while the planet was still inhabited. The remaining machinery looked alien at first, but then the observant explorer saw the familiar sight of a rusted chainsaw. Now there was a device you could only design so many different ways before you defeated its purpose. As he continued to look around the room and weave his way past machinery that hadn't been used for its intended purpose in ages, he found a door in the back of the shed that revealed a stairwell going down deep below the surface. Ambling over and pulling his solar lamp out of his equipment pouches, he carefully peered down to see where the stairs led. The small bubble of light cut through the darkness down roughly 2 stories. There the staircase ended and connected to something he couldn't see from his angle. Taking a step back, Psion Novastar closed the door and brought his pocket computer out of his jumpsuit pocket. He brought up the map that Gold Meadow had shared with him and focused on the park itself. Looks like there was an underground network of maintenance tunnels that had been barely explored. Tempting. Might be worth exploring a bit, depending on what had already been found down there. Either way, he needed to report his progress back to the base camp before he went much further. Keeping his pocket computer out and contacting the Orion research camp, he was soon transferred to a communications AI that was replacing Stardust. Hopefully it wouldn't be replacing her for too long. Hello, I am Oracle, the base's digital assistant. How can I help you? The program greeted in a calm monotone. I'm trying to report my current position and progress, Psion replied, already wondering if the Oracle will trap him in a conversation loop. Understood. Please state your name and relevant information, Oracle replied in that same monotone voice. Psion Novastar. I have arrived at the city park as planned. I'm currently inside an equipment shed once used by the park staff, and I found an entrance to the maintenance tunnels below the park. I think I will try to set up a temporary camp here, then continue exploring the area. Novastar out, Psion replied before signing off. Looking at his surroundings, Psion decided that was the best course of action. There was a workbench he could use to set up his equipment, and it looked like the staff break room could be used to sleep safely when the need arose. It would take a little work, but nothing he couldn't handle. Once he got set up, he'd be back at it, seeing what secrets this park held. End of episode.